This is Pamela Kuhn, and the curtain is up on Center Stage, the show about the arts and the artists behind their work. Nashville, Tennessee is a thriving and exciting city, from country western to rock and roll to fantastic food and theater. It seems to be the center of the universe. But it also has a thriving music scene, and one which shines with diversity and a Tennessee swagger that is uniquely its own. My guest today is John Hoomes, CEO and Artistic Director of Nashville Opera, a company which has built a reputation with repertoire from Richard Wagner to Philip Glass to Carly Simon. There is an interesting mix in the savvy of the opera company. It is fully aware of the reputation of the city of Nashville and reflects the upbeat demands of performing arts in this 21st century. John Hoomes has been an ardent and seemingly commander-at-arms of Nashville Opera since he started there in 1995. Under his leadership, Nashville Opera has emerged as Tennessee's largest operatic company with a reputation for adventurous programming. He has produced 7 world premieres, one which was hailed by the New York Times as an operatic miracle in Nashville. That opera was Elmer Gantry. Besides a rigorous educational outreach program, John Hoomes has developed Opera on Wheels, a beautiful mobile stage that takes live music to the streets in suburban areas, public parks, libraries, and community centers. Well, move over, Grand Ole Opry, because John Hoomes is in town and making his own waves with a regional operatic company that delivers. Thank you for being here, John. Welcome to Center Stage.
Thank you, Pamela. It's an honor to be here.
Oh, the honor is mine. Listen, I want to start out with a really obvious question to you, and that is, you have spent over 25 years at Nashville Opera. I mean, that is a long time for one man to be in one spot like this.
It is. It's very old school in a sense, right? To be, as you say, kind of the captain of a ship for a long time.
Yeah. Indeed. How many hats have you had to wear over the years?
Well, the company, our size, this type of regional company, I tell my staff, we all wear a multitude of hats all the time. But I came to this company first as the artistic director. And then about maybe 10 years ago, I changed positions into the CEO and artistic director to oversee the financial side and business side of the company, as well as the artistic side.
Wow.
So those are the 2 big hats I've worn.
Wow. Okay. Well, it hasn't killed you yet, John.
Not well. If you see a photo from me from 1995, it's a very different photo. There has been some wear and tear, but I'm still standing. I'm still here.
You are. I can't see the wear and tear. That's pretty good. You look eternally young to me. So where are you from originally?
I originally grew up about an hour outside of Pensacola, Florida. So the deep South, about an hour away from Pensacola, an hour away from Mobile, Alabama, in the little border of Florida, Alabama.
So were the arts always in your life?
Never. Growing up, never. There was nothing except television, and we had one movie house that I would go to religiously. I'd be there every weekend from a very young age. But there were no real arts. There was no real classical music. I had very little exposure to the arts for the longest time. But my grandfather, who passed away before I was born, he came to this country around 1900 from Germany, and he was a violinist. And it's really interesting. His children, my mother and my aunt, they have no musical ability or interest. But as a grandchild, I do. And so maybe it skipped a generation, and I feel it was kind of destiny from that.
And you just soaked that up from your grandparents, literally.
I think so. I think so. I don't know how that works, but I did have a very strong inclination toward music from a young age, plus theater, A lot of that came through my exposure to movies and cinema, I'm
Hmm.
sure, from a
Hmm.
very young age.
Hmm.
But I don't really think I saw my first opera until I was in high school, I guess.
And what was
Um,
your reaction then?
I really loved Broadway, and I felt this was basically Broadway with the best music in the world, is what it felt like,
Yeah,
you
that
know?
combination, that beautiful combination of theater and high operatic drama. Yeah, I can
Right.
imagine that. It's interesting. Our lives kind of mirror each other because I grew up in a small town in Eastern Oregon,
Mm,
and my only outlet was television. And I really always talk about this, how important television was for a certain era of us. If we were trapped in the house, that's all we had. If we lived in a small town, that's all we had. That was our presentation to the outside world. It's very important. And movie houses, undeniably the best.
I
Takes us
agree.
into another world.
Totally so.
Fabulous. So how
Yeah.
did you get into this line of work? What brought you to your work in theater, first of all?
Well, I was in theater in high school,
Hmm.
and in some musicals. I was an actor at one time, a singer also, but more of an actor, I guess. I As with so many small towns in the South, the other focus was the church. And so I grew up in a church and with singing in the church. And so I went to get my undergraduate degree at Samford University, which is in Birmingham, Alabama.
Hmm.
And they had a really wonderful music department at the time. Elizabeth Futrall came in a little few years after I did. So they had some terrific teachers and a great department. And I went there originally, I think, with the intent to be a minister of music in like a Texas megachurch, probably. And once you were in that school, though, you hit, in a sense, you hit a fork in the road where you wanted to pursue that type of ministry, or you wanted to study more of the secular classical music. And I'd been exposed to opera then, and so I took that route and never looked back, actually.
Wow. So what was that moment, that cathartic moment when you knew that you could actually make a living or a life in this vocation?
Am I sure of that now, Pamela?
I love that. So honest. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Definitely.
uh,
But was
it,
there a
it,
turning point?
well, the turning point for me is when I finished my undergraduate degree, I went to Indiana University,
Ah, there we go.
and I studied with some wonderful people there, and I felt like this little kid in a giant, sometimes scary candy shop, because I don't know if you know Indiana, but
Yes, I
the
do.
Musical Arts Center has a stage pretty much the equivalent of the Met, with the hydraulic wagons and the size sets, and it was an amazing time to be there with the talent that were there. Timothy Noble was there at the time, Sylvia McNair I went to school with. It was a wonderful group of artists. And I studied with a gentleman there whose name was Ross Allen, who not many people remember him today, but he was a wonderful teacher, a wonderful stage director. And that really is how I kind of moved into this direction full
Okay.
fledged, is watching him work, especially with choruses, doing a production like Carmen, watching him use the chorus to create almost paintings on stage. And I'd never seen anything like that. And to this day, I love working with choruses. I love a show with a gigantic chorus, and many
That's
people don't. But
that's right.
as a director, I love a chorus show. Love it.
Okay, I've never spoken to a stage director that actually enjoys working with the chorus, because sometimes, it's just moving masses of people around stage, and sometimes they can't move well, but that's fantastic. How
Yeah,
interesting.
and it's moving people with great intent, and sometimes that is dramatically motivated. Other times it's purely off the music and
Yeah.
it's more choreographed. We just did a production of La Boheme, and Act Two in La Boheme, as you know, is one of the biggest cacophonies of everything.
Mhm.
But I love that. And I love trying to organize it so you're directing not just the chorus or the singers on stage, you're really directing the audience of where they need to look, of what's important at what time.
So this comes back to film again, doesn't it? You know, where
It,
the
it,
camera is going to focus and take the audience's eye.
it does. And where
Right.
can I get a two shot or a three shot? And that's what you're supposed to see. You're exactly right.
So tell me this, film buff to film buff, because
Mm.
oh my God, I could live in film. In fact, if I had to do it over again, I'd go back to film school, but
Oh
never
my gosh, we
mind.
have so much alike. Oh my
Yeah,
God, we are so much alike.
in my next life, John, I promise you. But anyway, what films really moved you? What was your genre that you loved the most?
Oh, I really loved a lot of foreign movies because I like the language and the challenge of language,
Mhm.
and the super titles that movies would use that would give you an idea of it. The shows we do here, I write our own super titles, and translate it, and so it kind of I'm able to staying with what the librettist wrote, also make it kind of safe for an audience what I feel it should say sometimes.
Yeah,
Sometimes you subtitle the subtext of what you need to know. Um, I think they're surtitles are their own art form and they aren't as recognized. But I love foreign films. I love the films of Kurosawa.
hmm,
He has a movie called Ran, which is Ran,
yeah,
based on King Lear, which is just a masterpiece.
yes,
But not just those movies. A big movie, life-changing moment for me was seeing. I went to see. This dates me. I went to see Jaws the weekend it came out, which is in the mid 1970s, and it was a revelatory thing.
yeah.
And a lot of that was the use of music in that movie, and the way the score and the score was so tied to the drama and I remember watching that going, oh, this makes so much sense. So much sense.
Absolutely. I must have been with you in the same theater that weekend. I was on tour with the Roger Wagner Chorale. I'll never forget that, out of Los Angeles. And all of
Oh
us
my gosh.
decided to go to Jaws. And I had the same experience. I mean, yeah, it's music which really, meets the master. So
Hmm.
they were the perfect pairing. Wow, this is so interesting. I love this adoration of the visual with you. This is really fantastic. So how did you come to Nashville Opera then, through this journey of yours?
Oh, well, I finished my work at Indiana University, and again, I can't say enough about my education there because
Mhm.
my first year I got to work with Leonard Bernstein, who was there writing A Quiet Place, and I didn't realize at the time just how bizarre that is, but I got to work with him, which was fabulous. And after I left IU, I started work first as a stage manager, and to work, backstage,
Mhm.
and then started assistant directing and then directing. I was lucky enough to pretty much make a living those years as I was like being kind of a gypsy going from place to place.
Mhm.
Um, but I really wanted to direct. I wanted to direct the shows myself. And those opportunities came little by little. I worked at Cincinnati Opera for a few seasons as an assistant director, and I was in Opera Company of Philadelphia for a while, and in Des Moines Metro Opera in the few summers there, kind of learning your craft.
Mhm. Right.
But I was fortunate enough to be successful in that, and I loved working with singers. I have a voice degree, but I studied degree not because I wanted to sing. It's because I wanted to understand the mechanics of singing, so I knew how to speak with a singer, to know what they were going through when they were trying to go through to create a role on stage.
That's fantastic.
And
Wonderful.
so I would tour a good bit around the country with as a director, and then Nashville was making a change, and I remember coming through Nashville years ago, and I really liked the city. This is way before I came here, and I remember thinking, "There's so much in this city, and I don't know it that well, but this would be a nice place, to live. I really
Yeah.
like the city." And then I had the opportunity, and I was married to Carol Penterman at the time, who was also a former singer, stage manager. And before we came to Nashville, she and I um, were talking, and we said, we should. I'd be nice if we could run a company. because I've been in many companies that were very dysfunctional in the way they worked. And
Right.
she said, maybe we could learn from that and create something that would be fair for everybody and fair for the singers, and everybody would be treated wonderfully. It was very young and idealistic. But we put together a business plan of how we would do our company. And we were actually looking for different cities that didn't have an opera company that we may want to start one.
Wow.
Um, and then by coincidence, she was working as a stage manager here in Nashville, and they were making a big change in management. And she kind of called me and she said, "Do you want me to show them the business plan?" I said, "Yeah, why not?" And so we did. And then we had a few meetings and a couple more meetings, and they offered us the position. And we came here as a couple, where Carol came as the executive director, and then I would come as the artistic director.
Right.
And she was here for about a year before me, because I was in and out because I had other jobs I had to
Right.
fulfill.
Right.
And then we both came here full time and have been here ever since, in the process of working to grow this company. And another unique thing, I guess, is we never looked at it as coming to this company and being here a couple of years and jumping somewhere else. We really wanted to build a legacy with this company, and a legacy of the arts for our city of Nashville.
Yeah.
And so, as you say, I'm still here after over 25 years.
Okay, this is admirable. And I know what you're speaking about when you're jumping around in jobs, just trying to survive and learn your craft.
Sure.
But facing what you called the dysfunction in some companies, that is a reality. I think every performer, every stagehand knows about every company according to its own sense of dysfunction in a way. In the professional world. So
It's
for
true.
you to really step apart and want to have something you could build from the ground up is very admirable.
Well, thank you. And when we started, when I first came here, I think the budget of the Nashville Opera was around $340,000, right? And we would do one, maybe two shows a year if we
Yeah.
had the money. And we couldn't pay a lot, and so I called a lot of favors in, and we would treat people very well when they would come here. But I had a lot of great singer friends, and singers want to sing, you know. So we did some great stuff early on, and and I'm proud to say now, through a lot of hard work and a lot of fundraising, I think our next year's budget is around almost $3.2 million. So we've grown a lot.
I'm speechless there. Okay, so they don't want to lose you because your recipe is right. Whatever you're doing is right. Okay. Is Carol still in the mix there with you?
She is. About 10 years ago, she felt she wanted to try something else and went out on her own. I mean, we're still together, but she left the opera company and went out as a grant writer. She's a fantastic grant writer, and she also worked some in home health care for a while. She had a business with
Oh,
that
wow.
that she started, and she has now sold that, and she's still grant writing, but she's also back with us here. She's more of my operations manager now.
Okay. You're talking about moving mountains here. I mean, you've
Yeah.
gone from no budget and one or two productions a year to, five or six that you're doing now. And you're doing large scale works. I mean, you've just come off a very successful Das Rheingold with a fantastically stunning cast.
Oh, thank you.
Went down well in the reviews, John.
Well, and our audience really loved it, and I'm so thrilled with the audiences of Nashville, because they're not afraid to try anything new. And if we do something like Carmen, then that's a very common opera name, or Aida, or one of those.
Right.
But we've done, as you mentioned, we've done some very obscure pieces, and that's intentional on my part, because I think it's important to be exposed to all kind of different arts.
Mm-hmm.
But Nashville is interesting because we have an audience for what we do, whether it's Philip Glass or whether it's Puccini, and nobody here seems to be afraid of new work. And I've done a lot of world premieres, and I think a lot of that is that Nashville is a city of new work and new musical work, because most people come to Nashville to be songwriters.
Yeah.
And maybe in the pop world, maybe in the country world. I was parked downtown a few years ago, and my battery was dead. And so I called AAA, and the AAA guy in his truck, he was there like this, boom, he was just there. And I said, my gosh, that was fast. And he said, I was just sitting up the street in my truck working on my songs.
Of course.
And of course, that's what you do, like you do, right? That's what you do here. But because of that, everybody is writing songs, and
Mhm.
people are just used to having new music. They want a new song, they want a new hit song, but they want new music. And so when I say we're doing something brand new, I don't get a reaction of we don't like modern work. It's great. Let's hear it. Let's see what it is. That's very
Oh.
unique, I know.
When did you start that focus on modern and contemporary opera?
We kind of dabbled in it. Well, we've always kind of dabbled in it because our like maybe third year here, we did Britain's The Turn of a Screw as part of our season, which no one here seems to have known. And a lot of people came to it, and some people left scratching their heads, and other people felt it was revelatory. And that's great. I'm very happy with that because all art is not necessarily for everyone. You may not like something, and that's okay, but
Mhm.
you need to experience it. You
Mhm.
need to have the chance to see it. And so we started a series about 10 years ago where we would be dedicated to doing modern works, new works, non-mainstream works. Before that, we would still do some pieces that were not considered main stage, and we do them on our larger theater. We did a production of Mark Blitzstein's Regina,
Mhm.
which is a fantastic piece. We did Peter Maxwell Davies' The Lighthouse,
Oh yeah. Mhm.
and that's about as polarizing as you can get with people. And again, some people felt it was the best thing they'd ever seen, and other people stormed out. But that's how you grow, is
Yeah.
you expose people to this. And so before we started the series that we do at the Lift Center, which is the Noah Lift Opera Center, which is our home, um, we programmed Philip Glass's The Fall of the House of Usher.
Right.
And it was very unique in the way we did it because I experiment so much with video here. I have a wonderful video and lighting guy named Barry Steele who is just brilliant beyond belief on a budget. And we did The Fall of the House of Usher, and it was our first foray into Philip Glass as well.
Mhm.
But we did this in such a way that there was a downstage screen, there was an upstage rear projection screen with front of house video. So the singers were in between, kind of sandwiched between two walls of alternating video. So it was very dreamlike, very surreal, a huge experiment. But it went over really, really well. And I did have one board member after he saw it say that, when you proposed this in the board meeting, he said, I'll be honest, I thought you were crazy as hell for this type of thing. But he said, this was fabulous.
Mhm.
And that's the best you can hope for.
That is the best, especially from the board members. You got to keep them happy.
You
I
got to
mean,
keep them happy. Yeah. And
oh,
so ten years ago, we started a series at the Noah Liff Opera Center where every year we would do one, sometimes two alternative type of pieces.
okay.
And so we did The Hydrogen Jukebox by Philip Glass. We did Michael Nyman's The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of her pieces and a Carly Simon piece that we
Yeah.
did, a piece that she wrote for the Met Guild, which I remembered, but nobody else did. And so we did
Mhm.
it. And
Mhm. Mhm.
she was a sweetheart to work with and talk to about it. But we've given the people of Nashville some really wide-ranging experience.
And you have an audience that you don't have to drum up. They're actually there for you because of
Uh,
this sense of curiosity that Nashville kind of breeds.
well, yes, this is true. We're in the process now. We start rehearsal tomorrow for a piece called "Stuck Elevator"
Mhm.
by Byron Young, and this piece started about 10 years ago, more as a music theater piece, and now we've evolved it more into an opera. So we're doing kind of a world premiere of the opera version, and that piece will premiere at the end of January, January 2021, 22. And I'm really excited about it. I think it's a great, great piece, and we're already over half sold for it with no advertising yet.
So I think the Metropolitan Opera needs to come and talk to you about how to keep an audience. So let's talk about that a little bit. I have a feeling as a singer myself and really watching, the dynamic of what's going on in the United States as opposed to Europe. I have a
Mhm.
feeling that regional houses are having a better time with their audiences right now, after the pandemic. I know it's been very hard to get everyone's confidence back or
Right.
encourage people to get out of their easy chair, instead of watching it on a screen. But I do feel that regional opera has a chance, like you're showing right now, of being able to control the situation so much better and working within your own budget, knowing your audience, knowing what really works. And of course, with your vast experience at Nashville, you really know what cooks. Do you believe there's truth to that? That perhaps the smaller companies and the smaller orchestras are able to fill up the halls, whereas in New York, they're having a hard time.
I totally agree with you. And I think smaller companies have a chance to be more nimble and to change quickly,
Yeah.
because we're more like little speedboats, and many companies are at large ocean liners, and they turn slowly, you know.
Yeah.
But we're able to zip around and change things, and it's I think you're right. I think it's easier for companies our size to do that. And so, for instance, when the pandemic started in the fall, we were planning a big production of Rigoletto, kind of a film noir Rigoletto that was in the spring of 19. And about a week before we started, we had to shut it all down.
Right.
We had to, everybody just shut down. And I'm very proud though that we didn't just shut down and say, too bad everybody. I went to my board and I said that we need to pay the singers something. We can't just shut down.
Excellent.
And so we ended up paying everybody involved, a percentage, like half of what we get their contract, because we couldn't just cut people loose. I mean,
Right.
that's terrible with the time coming. And so we did that, and we received a lot of goodwill from that. That wasn't my intent. My
Imagine.
intent was to be fair to people.
Mhm.
But we had been in the works of putting together a song cycle slash opera about women's suffrage for the summer, because it was the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage, and we had been asked to create a small piece for the lobby of a museum that we would do. And so we were in the midst of talking about what that would be, and then the pandemic hit, and so we couldn't perform live. And so we went to a local composer whose name is Dave Ragland. And I went to him and I said, I want to talk to you about writing something. But the more research I did, the less I thought it would be about women's suffrage, because there was a lot being written about that. But the more research I did, I found out that women of color didn't necessarily get the vote when
Mm.
women received suffrage. And I said, I kind of want to do a show about that. And a lot of women did not receive the vote until the civil rights movement. And
Wow.
Nashville was very important in that. The Woolworth's lunch counter was a big place of resistance with John Lewis. And so I went to Dave and I said, I want you to, get a librettist you like. So there are a couple of great playwrights in town, and let's put something together. And so that became a movie called One Vote One,
Yes.
which won an Emmy for Best Technical Achievement. But we recorded that at the height of the pandemic, and it was an opera movie that we did. It's streaming live on our website. Live, it's streaming free on our website right now that you can see.
Mhm.
But I was really proud of that. But that's something that happened in a handful of months. I mean, it was this close to, hey kids, my dad has a barn. Let's do a show. We're going to do a movie. We're going to do a movie. And so there was a wonderful video film guy in town named Anthony Popolo who works with us archiving our shows. And so I went to him, and so he and I co-directed it, and we wrote this movie, and it was different than a filmed stage play. This was actually a movie that's cut together in scenes, and I finally, Pamela, got to be a movie director. Finally, after all these years,
Finally. Oh
and
my
and
gosh.
and it went over really well. And we once we finished it, we offered it free to any educators with college or high school, and it's received I think probably 150,000 hits now, and that may be classrooms, so we aren't even sure how many people we reached with it. But it was a great experience. But that's something we could do just because we're not a giant company,
Right.
and we could put this together quickly.
I like the word you use, nimble. I think that sums it up, actually. You really have your finger on the pulse of what's going to work, and you know your budget, and you know your audience. I mean,
Right.
you know the boundaries. Well, I've got to ask you the obvious question now. I mean, you must be so proud of that. First of all, I mean, congratulations on that, John. That's
Mm,
really something.
thank you.
Are you going to move into film at some point? Or do you see that in the far horizon? I mean, is that a Shangri-La moment for you if you could do it? Let's forget singers for a minute, but just the art of the visual?
It is a Shangri-La moment. Maybe. I mean, I think about that, and there are times I think, what if I had gone into film? What if I had moved to Hollywood and tried that? But looking back on everything, I think I would miss the music now.
Yeah.
I'd miss the music and the singers. I would miss La Boheme. Oh my gosh! As
Yes.
much as I love film, that's a different experience, and I think I would miss it totally.
Amazing. Well, I'm glad you're there and I'm glad you're doing what you're doing for the world of opera. This is so fantastic. So tell me, I've never been to Nashville.
Hmm.
And I can only imagine. I mean, this is a Renaissance city right now. It sounds like it's on fire, literally. What is the general disposition of the city, and how does that lend itself, to your success?
Well, I think we're a city that is becoming, and we are growing. And there's good and bad with that because there is an old Nashville that is lamented by many people that is going away of what it was.
Okay.
Because it was kind of a large small town, and there was a big industry here, a music industry, and some people are lamenting it's becoming more corporate now in the attitudes of music. That's in popular music primarily. But it's a very exciting city because to me, because we have so many people moving here. And according to some statistic I read, there are like 100 people moving here per day. And
Incredible.
that's a huge amount. And so a few years ago, we did a production of Tosca, right, down at the TPAC where we perform, large scale, pretty traditional production.
Mhm.
And we had some ticket data, and it sold quite well. But 25 to 30% of all the tickets we sold were brand new people to us. And they weren't in
Oh,
our database. They'd never bought a ticket before. And I have a feeling it's all the new people coming in are finding us and finding all the arts. And we just did a big production here at the Lip Center, a production of Menotti's The Medium.
mhm.
And same thing. Almost 30% of all the tickets sold were brand new people.
Do we know of those people what the average age is? I mean, are you getting to a younger audience? I mean, I would think
Oh,
so.
we are. We are reaching a much younger audience, and that's wonderful. The challenge is keeping the younger audience happy along with the older,
Hmm.
more traditional audience.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so even when we do a classical work, I mean, I sometimes tweak it somewhat, or put some things in it that may not fly to a fully traditional audience, but our audience, they kind of look for that. They kind of expect that.
I love that. You can't leave. You can never leave Nashville Opera. Okay, you got it going. You're in control. I love it. So tell me, with this vast renaissance of players there in Nashville, how much crossover do you do? I mean, you're sitting there with some of the greatest guitarists in the world, out in the street writing songs. How often do you guys trade off, actually?
Well, we've actually done some work like that. I mean, one of my favorite parts of Nashville, a part of being here, is I'll be at a cocktail party, and someone will come up. Usually, my development person who knows everybody, she'll come up and she'll say, "Do you know who the guy in the corner is?" I said, "No," and she says, "It's Steve Cropper," and I said, "Steve Cropper?" Yeah, she said, "Yeah, he wrote 'Sitting on the Dock of the Bay.'"
Oh.
And he was the original guitarist in the Blues Brothers band. And I went, really? And he lives in Nashville. So
Nice.
there are plenty of musical forces that are here.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
about the most musical crossover we have really done is I've done two productions, world premieres here by a songwriter named Marcus Hummin.
Yes, yes.
And I love Marcus Hummin. I love his music. But he's a very successful songwriter, kind of a country songwriter, pop songwriter. He was one of the major writers for the Dixie Chicks at one time. He wrote "Cowboy Take Me Away,"
Mm-hmm.
and a wonderful guy. I mean, oh my gosh, wonderful guy. And so he and I connected a number of years ago, and we did a world premiere of a piece he wrote, an opera that he wrote called Surrender Road. And it was a very successful here, and it's very kind of pop classical. And I'm not really sure what happened to it. I know Peter Gelb was interested in it at one time. I don't know whatever happened there. I think it's kind of like the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark when they put the Ark in that big warehouse, and it kind of top men will be looking at this. I don't know what
And
happened.
they shut the door. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what happened to that.
That is the
But
most perfect way of describing that, actually, because I think there's a great element of truth in that, and they should be opening that door and yeah, seeking the ark out again.
and just seeing what's there.
Interesting.
But this
Very
past
interesting.
January, we did another of Marcus's piece called Favorite Son,
Hmm.
and it is a wonderful piece. Again, streaming free on our website for now. But it is a brilliantly beautiful piece. And but again, we do these pieces in Nashville, and that's definitely a crossover piece. And
Yeah.
it is an opera, but it takes more of a band.
Yeah.
It's but we'll experiment with that, and our audience, they really love that.
Oh, you're having a good time. So, within all of this, how many local singers are you able to utilize?
We use a good bit of a number of local singers. Our obviously we have a chorus and sometimes big chorus, and those are all local singers.
Hmm.
In the medium that we just did, out of a cast of six, two of those were people that live here that are really wonderful.
Hmm.
Um, we
Fantastic.
we utilize a number of local singers on our main stage, but also in a program we started during the pandemic called Opera on Wheels,
Yes.
where we take opera programs out into communities. We have kind of an opera trailer truck that we take out,
Wonderful.
and that's all with local singers. That's all with local singers, and it's terrific. We love being able to take the art out to people.
Of course. And it
Yeah,
pays off. It pays off in droves. Again,
it does.
very clever. And with your weather down there, it's amenable. It's yeah, it's the right combination. It's the right cocktail. Talk to me too about your fellowship, the HBCU fellowship at Tennessee State.
Sure. We started this again during the pandemic
Hmm.
because schools were all doing remote learning. And there are two HBCUs here in Nashville, Tennessee State University and Fisk University.
Hmm.
And so we developed a partnership with these two schools. It's a masterclass series, and it started all virtual because it had to. I would invite various teaching artists in the business and some great singers to come in for a Zoom meeting, kind of like we're doing with the students. A lot of different subjects. A couple of these were singing master classes, but that's hard on Zoom, you
Yeah.
know. Uh, so we would do a master class on auditioning and audition technique and what to wear and how to act when you come in. And I think one we had baritone Lester Lynch and Talise Trevine was here, and so we were able to talk about that. We were able to talk about rep. We had five different masterclass Zooms on different types of rep with German language, French language, um, English, Italian, and African American opera and art song.
Very interesting.
Um, yeah, and it's gone over really, really well. We've continued it the past couple of years, and we're going to continue it. And there's some wonderful students and a lot of talent, a great deal of talent at these schools here in town.
That's wonderful. That's what you've got it all. So, do you have any advice, from your vast experience of really building from the ground up? Your advice to singers at this point, to operatic singers who are just getting started, especially after COVID, is there anything you'd like to say to them to keep them going, to keep the fire burning, so to speak?
A big thing I tell singers when I do master classes is always keep in mind that this is a business. And when you do an audition, it's really a job interview. I don't want to deglamorize what we do, but it's a job interview. And the better you can present yourself, the better. If you happen to get a job with a company, um, the more you connect with that company, the more you connect with their patrons and their donors,
Mm-hmm.
it only benefits you. And why would you not?
Exactly.
Why would you not? But I was not taught that, however, in school. And I was not taught a lot about development or fundraising in school. And I wish I was. I
I
wish I
know.
had been,
I think
because that's super.
that's happening more and more though now, isn't it, John,
Mhm.
in
I
schools?
believe it is. I
Yeah.
believe it is that you just, because you're obviously you're hired to sing, but there's a lot more to it than just singing. It
Right.
is a business. But you can certainly move forward in that if you remember that, and if you connect with people, and if you have a chance to network with people, like any business.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good words. So, are you the kind of guy in your process of developing an idea, let's say, or choosing your operas? Are you the kind of guy that lays in bed at night and thinks, "Oh, I want to do this," or how do you cast your spell when you're trying to decide, your year and your repertoire?
I listen to a lot of things in my car as I
Huh.
drive. And I have a moderate commute, and so I can put things on, and I've come to the conclusion that if I can listen to it in my car and really like the piece, I can probably make it work. Because so many pieces, so too many modern pieces, shall we say, contemporary pieces, they're reliant on the mechanics or the video. They're reliant on, you can't just listen to it as music,
Yeah.
and that I think can get in the way of a piece. Because if I put on La Boheme, I can drive down the road and be happy as heck listening to that.
Yeah.
And I felt that a number of years ago we did a world premiere. Robert Aldridge wrote an opera called Elmer Gantry,
Mhm.
which I think is one of the great American operas, and very few people know about it. But it's a wonderful piece, and that was a piece I could really listen to in the car with great pleasure and listen
Interesting.
to and drive. And a lot of it was classical but jazz based and also gospel based, and it's just a wonderful piece. But that's kind of my mark, is if I can, and that gives you, the more I listen to music, and I guess this is kind of unique, the more it kind of tells you, the more you hear it, not so much the libretto, although librettos are very important, but if it's a really good composer, so
Mhm.
many of the ideas and subtext come out of the music itself. And it has to. And as a director, you need to be able to access that and access that music and how it feels and what it means and how you can show that on a stage.
Well said. And what is this thing about driving or getting on a plane and having our greatest thoughts? It's like you say you're driving, and if it's really listenable and you find yourself immersed in it, that's it. It just opens up this whole kind of arena for us, doesn't it, in our
It
imagination?
does.
There's
It
something
does.
about travel and our greatest thoughts. I don't know. Maybe it's we filmmakers that think that way too. I don't know. Um,
Maybe.
Let me ask you this. I felt that Steven Spielberg, when he did West Side Story, when I heard all the barrage of the critics attacking it, and I
Mm,
watched it, and I remember feeling that it was so exquisite. I on its own, not comparing it to the former film, but
right.
really capturing the music, the dance, the essence of the visual, the strength of the dark side of oh my gosh. I thought it was marvelous. Would you agree? Would you be looking at something like that yourself? To really make a go a little further than most stage directors would.
Yeah. I think it's very unfair to compare it to any earlier version. It is its own unique vision, and I thought a very successful vision. I thought it was beautiful use of the music and the story, and kind of a fearless use sometimes, but it's
Yeah.
not the same thing. and you're going to get in trouble if you try to compare them both together because they're different.
Well, you're fearless, aren't you?
I like I like to think so. It depends. I'm in a strange position now because I'm the CEO and artistic director, and
Hmm.
so I'm the one that says I want 25 chairs for the banquet scene, and the other side of me says do it with 12. Use just 12. It's cheaper. So I get to spend the money and yet raise the money, and those two sides have to have conflict sometimes.
I love it. So when you're taking time off from these kind of thoughts, what do you do in your downtime, John?
I like to cook. Primarily, well, a lot of Cajun things. I don't know why. I just like gumbo a lot. But I cook and I watch a lot of movies. I
Yeah.
watch a lot of film, and I have a nice little screening place at home. I like to watch things, and like we talked earlier, not just a nice esoteric art film, which are great, but I have a real affinity for B movies. I have an affinity for Roger Corman and Attack of the Crab Monsters and things like that, which I believe you can use as an opera director. I think
Absolutely.
you can use all kind of things. And the teacher I mentioned before in grad school, one big thing he said that stuck with me is he said, as an artist, you should expose yourself to everything you can. You should go to every museum you can. You should see every opera and ballet and symphony, movie, because all of it can create the fabric of what you are and your experience. And I've never forgotten that. And it's so true.
Wow. I guess you haven't because that's made you strong in Nashville. Admirable, John. Very admirable. My gosh. All right. So if I had to ask you what I ask all of my guests, and that is there one word or phrase that really describes who you are deep, deep within your heart? What would that be?
Um, a word, a word I think would be resilient,
Hmm.
and that anything comes your way, you find a way to go around or go through it. And as a phrase, though, I think my favorite phrase is make a difference.
There you go. And I have to say, on your website, I love the phrase "sing bravely."
Oh,
And
thank you.
and I know that you have made this wonderful statement about solidarity. I have a feeling that Nashville Opera has probably embraced that before Black Lives Matter or the Me Too
Hmm.
movement. I mean, it sounds to me like you're a shining beacon for that and diversity. So,
Thank you.
congrats to you. Well, I have to say, this has been an illuminating conversation. Not exactly what I expected, and I'm loving the whole film front. And maybe at some point have a chance to go off and work with Mr. Spielberg or, J.J. Abrams or whoever the flavor of the month is now. But for now, Nashville loves you, and I think it's your presence is important, and I applaud your success. Moving up with that kind of budget, admirable. The singers you're using, fantastic. But I love your sense of community.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Pamela. Thank you so much.
So, what other visions for the future? I know Stuck Elevator will be fantastic, I'm sure. And what have you got in mind in the next couple of years?
Well, we're going to continue. We're going to continue pretty much the way we've gone, which is a combination of classical work as well as non-mainstream work.
Mhm.
I jokingly told my board it's kind of like you're building a shopping mall and you want your two anchor stores. So I want my Carmen and I want my Bohème, but in the middle, I could have my more obscure stores that cater to other taste.
Yes,
And
you
so we'll continue that. I think our like I said, our audience seemed to really like that. And but the more you can be exposed to, the better. And I love exposing an audience to something. And one thing I want to mention is we did a show here a few years ago. We did David Lang's The Difficulty of Crossing a Field,
Mm.
and that was in our small hall. And it's a very challenging piece as well, and it's a very avant-garde piece. And afterward, um, the audience again was mixed on what it was they saw. And I got a note from a man the following week in which he had scrawled like angrily a wasted night in the theater, underline, underline. But I had another woman after the show come up And she said, I want to tell you, she said, I just moved here from Los Angeles and never, ever would I've expected to see this type of art in Nashville.
Right. Right.
And and that's great.
You're making people think. And what purpose is art? I mean, it's to take us out of chaos and let us think about things and ruminate. And you're leaving that. I mean, that's fantastic. You're
Right.
doing your job. Wonderful. And I hope
Thank
you
you.
do it for many more years. And another quarter of a century, John. Your life seems to be devoted in a happy place. And I hope that we can meet in your film theater at some point.
I'll do my best to make that happen, or at least for a drink in Nashville if you're passing through the town,
Oh,
please.
well, I'll pick my Roger Corman film and I'll challenge you and see who knows more trivia, you know?
Uh-oh.
You go.
Uh-oh.
Listen, I want to thank you for being on Center Stage. This has been highly illuminating and very enjoyable. And good luck to you in everything. I hope Stuck Elevator is a big audience grabber, and you'll go on from there. And don't stay a stranger to us here. I'd be happy to support Nashville Opera. And to all my listeners out there, please go to nashvilleopera.org for more information. And you'll be met with a really beautifully laid out website. I have to compliment you on that too, because some websites aren't so user friendly, and you've gone to great pains to really over articulate, your purposes, and I love that. So there's no gray area.
Well, thank you.
Bravo again.
I attribute that to our marketing person whose name is William Schutz. He does a wonderful job for sure. Thank you.
And before I go, I wanted to ask you about your work with Dean Williamson. It seems that there is a really good conjugation there in energy. Am I right?
I love Dean Williamson. Yes, we first worked together in 2008. He conducted a Romeo and Juliet here, and we really clicked. And then a number of years later, I thought it'd be nice to have a music director. And so I talked to Dean, and he agreed. And so Dean's been our music director now for about 10 years.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
he's a wonderful conductor and a terrific person for sure.
So he's a keeper.
He's definitely a keeper. He is.
All right, John, we'll go forth and enjoy your work and continue to be this inspiration to us all that we can follow in many, many ways, from diversity to very clever productions. And I hope to meet you soon. And
I hope so too.
And to all my listeners, I hope you'll go to centerstagewithpamelakuhn.com, where you can find a gallery of the best of my shows. And as I said, nashvilleopera.org. And I have the feeling if you find yourselves in Nashville, you'll be able to find a ticket. And more importantly, meet the people behind the scenes, which, hey, how often do we get to do that in New York City, So all the best to you guys. And I wish you all well. And to my listeners, stay safe out there. This is Pamela Kuhn, and the curtain is now down on Center Stage.